Words of Wilfred Owen, perhaps the greatest of the First World War poets, have been brought to life in a documentary to be shown on BBC television tonight. It's part of the Ancestors series. Researchers went back to the battlefield where they believed Owen had actually experienced the things he wrote about in his poem, The Sentry. Wilfred Owen was killed in the final days of World War I, but his poetry has provided a tremendous insight into the realities of life in the trenches. Peter Owen is Wilfred's nephew. He went along with BBC researchers to the battlefield. Peter, good morning.
Good morning.
What was it like when you got there? What did the site look like when you arrived?
Oh, the site was, well, the Heidenkopf, which is the German for the Heathen's Head, was just a plain bare field. I had seen it before, and you'd never have known anything was there at all. It was just sometimes ploughed and sometimes not, because the local farmer, Jean-Claude Samien, didn't like ploughing in that field because he was always turning up bits of old ordnance, as rise every year onto the fields of France and are stored around. It is quite amazing how much ordnance there still exists since those days.
And in the course of the research that was being carried out, the sentry post was uncovered. Tell us about that.
Well, this was, I mean, the whole of that trip, that expedition, had a very deep resonance for me, as you can probably appreciate,
yes.
Because I was tracing my Uncle Wilfred's steps, as it were, the first time he'd been really in the front. And as he described it in the letter he wrote to Susan Owen, he lived through the 50 worst hours of agony of his happy life. But from a plain field, I mean, they brought in the JCB and opened up the ground. And then a very dedicated team of archaeologists painstakingly examined the area that we were digging in, and that was only about 60 meters by 60 meters maximum. And they, in the course of the digging, found 3 bodies, and they found 2 Germans who the War Graves Commission have managed to identify, and 1 British soldier of the Royal Lancasters. They know he was one of 20, but in Wilfred's poem that he wrote some 15 months, 18 months later, The Sentry, in fact, Wilfred first of all called The Sentry the Blind. And this was because in this dugout, in which Wilfred was for 50 hours knee-deep in water, very cold, being shelled, machine guns all over the place, he had to have a sentry up. And he posted the sentry, as he says in this letter to his mother, halfway down the steps, really to try and protect him, because the sentry next door had been killed. And the sentry was unfortunately hit and fell down the stairs, crying, "I'm blind, I'm blind." And Wilfred held a light to his eyes and said, "If you can see the least light, you're not blind. In time, you'll get all right." And the terrible thing about finding the British soldier was the British soldier had been there probably in the summer before Wilfred was there, because they could tell this from the, unfortunately at breakfast time, blowfly marks in his bones, because it was and so he may well have been there, but this British soldier, whose fingers were curled as though in agony when he died, had 3 candles on him. And you can imagine that the feelings that ran through me when you find out that he's got 3 candles and Wilfred's poem, which he called The Blind, and Sassoon then wrote The Sentry. So that's how it came about. But either title would have been perfectly good for it.
How did you feel about the prospect of actually going there with the television crew, with the people that were carrying out this excavation of, as you say, an area that the farmer around it had been reluctant to allow to have excavated previously?
What do you mean? How do I feel about it?
Well, I mean, were there any anxiety in your mind when you were contemplating going over there? Was it when you got there? Was it different to how you imagined it might be?
No, I mean, well, I had actually been there before, and I'd seen the field, and we'd stood where we thought the dugout was. The remarkable thing, and I had no qualms about going there. I mean, certainly one has qualms about finding bodies, but the bodies that were found were properly looked after, and the British soldier will be reburied by his regiment on July the 1st. So I had no qualms from that point of view, and the whole of the team, the digging team and the archaeological team, and the whole of the BBC approach was so professional that you couldn't really, find fault in the way that they dealt with it. It was a magnificent